Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Vintage Books Live. We have a very special episode tonight. We are for Halloween, Armin Tolentino and Will Erickson are visiting so that we can have a little fun with some poetry. And so we've got guests here that are live on Zoom for folks that wanted to sign in and participate in the workshop, but you are more than welcome if you're watching live to also participate, and I can chat with you in the chat because I've got that window open here so I can see if anybody posts anything. So you're welcome to participate either way, whichever feels most comfortable to you. So I am gonna start. So the format we're gonna use tonight loosely is I asked Armin and Will, and I've got one too, to pick out something to read that felt spooky in some way, like that, whatever that meant to each of us. And then I asked Armin if we could do a couple of fun poetry exercises to write our own spooky poem. And then at the end, I asked them if they would read something from their stuff that they felt was appropriate. And we expanded it out to make it easier for them to pick. It could be something Halloweeny or spooky, but it also could be just autumn or whatever. So that's kind of the general path we're going to follow tonight. So Armin, would you like to open and go ahead with whatever poem you chose for the spooky season?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vintage Books, for hosting us, Christy. It's always great to spend a little time with you all. We didn't coordinate this, so I am going first, and maybe what I'm reading is what you all were going to read. And then, sorry, that's how it happens. Be ready to change on the fly. I'm going to read a poem from this collection called Daughters by
Very
Brittany
cool.
Corrigan, who is a Portland-based poet, and this
Oh,
is
cool.
by Airly Press. And this collection is fantastic. It is all poems in the voice of daughters of various creatures, beings. So, for example, one of the poems is Bigfoot's daughter. There's Werewolf's daughter. There is the vampire's daughter. So I'm going to read you Ghost Hunter's daughter. Ghost Hunter's daughter. Don't ask me if it's true, if they exist. I'm not sure how to tell you what it's like in the shadows of each house, the other hum beneath the appliance hum, the way the walls lean in at me, the vibration everywhere I put my feet. Mostly, I like to stand still, listen to the clicks and knocks as my father adjusts the knobs, holds the padded headphones tightly to his ears. I watch my mother sway with her eyes fluttered shut, her fingers gathering the air. My father sees in green, sifts through the static, rounds corners with his lens, his metered tools. He walks right into cellars, basements, attics, untouched rooms, his eyes on the pull of the needle, the digital rise and fall. Right past as I inhabit doorways, press through the paneling and lathe. Sometimes I blow a kiss to my mother, send it out as a cool spectral puff across the hallway to her ashen cheek, or reach my loosened fingers up to pull at the hem of her blouse, encircle her legs with my body as she balances in the dark. They are always looking for the others, the ones who throw spoons or creak floorboards, nudge faucets or upend chairs, the ones who lift children from knotted bedclothes, whisper in sonar ping echoes, frighten by putting on their fiendish skins. My parents bottle and banish, exercise and incant, smudge and cleanse and burn and cast away. I hide in far corners, latch on to the screens of windows so they won't send me over too. I want to stay where the electric air surrounds us, where the light doesn't flicker and call.
Mhm.
And what I love about that poem, though, is right, like if I'm reading it right, there's something about like the parents are so obsessed with finding these ghosts, and this little girl just wants them to pay attention to her. And there's something very sad about that. I don't know if it's spooky, but it's
Yeah,
sad.
yeah. Well, I think there's elements of, I think they're not all ghosts, but maybe one of them is. So that was the other thing I was thinking as you were reading is, are they all not ghosts, or was one of them a ghost? So, Will, did you have something that you picked out?
I do, and it's going to become harder to convince anyone that we didn't plan this out because my poem is called The Double Daughter. It's called The Death of the Double Daughter, and it's by Kel Connor, and it's from this little chat book called Final Diaries. It's out from New Michigan Press. I think it came out a couple years back, and it kind of tracks maybe like a ghost of the speaker or an alternate of the speaker through, I guess, several different iterations of its own death. And it's not like scary poems, but they're very spooky. Like all of these poems are such a vibe. Um, and yeah, they're just great. If I can do it justice, you'll, I think, just hear the spookiness of it. Um, the death of the double daughter. On the morning of her drowning, the double daughter fills her pockets with fish hooks. As her last act on the land, she chooses to use one, impaling a bait fish with great care, hook threaded through the skin above the spine. This spares the minnow's life. The call of the lure is not the fact of the body, but the little bit of fight left in it. She loves the gulping thump of the water breaking as the fish hits, as though she'd thrown a stone too large to skip on the surface, but too small to sink her. She declined to tie the hook to a line, so the fish is permitted some terrible freedom. She isn't sure if her last act on land is an example of cruelty or of cowardice, but she begins to understand the things a false mercy might be disguised as, and decides at once that she will not rush to meet her death. She will walk alongside it slowly, sworn to carry its sign. I love that poem. I'm like, I get chills reading all these poems. You should buy that book. It's Final Diaries from New Michigan Press, Kel Connor. I think it's backwards on my screen, so I should flip the mirror,
It's
but I'm not
showing
going
up
to.
right on
Okay,
ours.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. So I went to Poetry Foundation and they have a whole list of Halloween poems. And I was like, yay. I was going to go out and get a bunch of anthologies and I was thinking, what do I want to read? What do I want to read? But I found one. Do you either of you know, is it Samhain? Is that how you pronounce it? The Celtic festival? I'm gonna assume that that's correct. And somebody who has some familiarity with Celtic can tell me if I've mangled it too badly. But I've been fascinated ever since I came up with this idea and thought, well, what could I read, or why is Halloween so interesting to us? And um, the original Celtic celebration, Samhain, like the idea was that it was kind of part harvest festival. You were getting to the harvest, but it was like the break between the two halves of the year, like the half of the growing and harvesting and the other half where you're not, and that there was somehow this thinning of the veil between the world of the dead and the living. And I just, that concept is really interesting to me. And also just seeing it come out in other cultures, like the idea of the Dia de los Muertos in Latin culture, where also the veil has thinned and that people can come from the other side. But what I find interesting is that in Latin culture, it's a celebration. Like you're inviting your relatives back and you're putting out, food for them and everything. Whereas I think in some other European cultures, it's like, don't go out because the spirits out. And it just interested me how different cultures approach it. But so the one I chose is Samhain by Annie Finch. And the subhead is the Celtic Halloween. In the season, leaves should love, since it gives them leave to move through the wind towards the ground they were watching while they hung. Legend says there is a seam stitching darkness like a name. Now, when dying grasses veil earth from the sky in one last pale wave, as autumn dies to bring winter back, and then the spring, we who die ourselves can peel back another kind of veil that hangs among us like thick smoke. Tonight at last I feel it shake. I feel the night stretching away, thousands long, behind the days, till they reach the darkness where all of me is ancestor. I move my hand and feel a touch move with me, and then I brush my own mind across another. I am with my mother's mother, sure as footsteps in my waiting self I find her, and she brings arms that carry answers for me, intimate, awaiting bounty. Carry me. She leaves this trail through a shudder of the veil, and leaves like amber where she stays, a gift for her perpetual gaze. I just thought that was kind of a fun look at sort of the idea of the split between and the seasons changing. And the other thing I think is really interesting is the idea that, we divided it into 4 seasons. There's winter, spring, summer, and fall, but there was that, the growing and life season, and then sort of the cold and death season, and there was just kind of 2. And I just think that that's kind of a fun way, interesting way to look at it. So, yeah. And I think the other thing I've been thinking about as we lead up to this is like what makes something truly scary. Like, why are we so interested in Halloween? Why are there now almost as many Halloween decorations as there are Christmas decorations? I was joking with my husband the other day. It's like, we could drive around like we do when we're just looking at Christmas lights. We can do that for Halloween now. And I just think, I wonder what it is that fascinates us. And it's almost like facing fear sideways. Like there's a lot of things in the world that are truly scary. And so facing like things that are scary, but maybe not as much as, I don't know. It's just an interesting idea.
So glad you mentioned that idea of like when we talk about this in this space of Halloween, if you celebrate that, or just the idea of the spooky, the scary, even the word horror, well, we know there's really horrible things happening in real life. And what I think we're talking about in this space is that idea of really the unknown, the supernatural, that beyond the human being. And there's something that's so captivating about that.
Mm-hmm.
And every culture has had some sort of reckoning with what is it beyond here, or what is it when the beyond here ends up here. And I swear I saw that, right?
Yeah.
I swear I've seen it. There were the lights in the forest. Something spoke to me. And how do we make sense of it? And there's something that is absolutely compelling of that feeling of as terrifying as it might be at any moment, to approach the unknown and say, I got closer than maybe someone else did.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can move on to anything you have planned for us.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Well, hey, I mean,
it's
I just
funny.
want to quickly get some thoughts though from these really, astute people in this call around like, is it possible to write a horror poem? Like, I think we believe there's such a thing as a horror movie that genuinely scares us. Like, I am uncomfortable. Now I know that because I watched Candyman when I was in fourth grade. And I saw it around that same time. I'm talking about the It that was on like ABC
Hmm.
with John Ritter, and it was still extremely scary for me. Um, and I was genuinely scared, and I think I would still be genuinely scared from horror movies. And I think I could be genuinely scared from horror novels. I don't know if I feel fear the same way with a poem, and that might just be because I haven't
Yeah.
read enough of poems that way. But I'm curious from folks, here, what are your thoughts on it? Is there such a thing as a horror poem the same way? Because we'll do some writing, but I don't know if it's
Yeah.
along the same pathway.
Yeah, I mean, I was as you were talking, I was compelled to bring up at least some poetry that I can think of offhand that is maybe disturbing. But I think when you start to make the comparison to like, horror novels or films, um, I think I start to lose the ability to make that argument for a poem, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I was gonna read, it was between two poets, and one was the one that I read from Cal Connor, and the other stuff that I was gonna read was from Ase Berg. Um, she's I hope I don't get it wrong. She's a Swedish poet, writing now, and her poems are beyond strange, often really gruesome, um, disturbing, dark in every sense. Um, you know, I've I've read books of hers like while falling asleep and then had like very horrifying dreams. I don't know that the poems are horror poems though, you know? Or I think too of like um Aimé Césaire, the Martinican poet of like, the mid 40s, surrealist poet, super weird, out there, brutal, violent kind of um they're resistance poems, but like they're very like visceral and brutal and tangible, but I still don't think it's horror.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it feels like maybe poetry can't, or no one's figured out the way to
Yeah.
provide enough space to do what I think horror needs to do, which is, create um that sort of like roller coaster build, to
Yeah.
the thrilling moment that is coming, but you don't know it's coming.
Yeah.
You like deliberately put off the recognition of that moment. But I don't know.
Madeline makes kind of the same point. She said, "Is there enough space in a poem for that?" Is essentially the same kind of thing. I don't know. I think what's interesting is I've been thinking lately about what's the definition of horror, because I have always been a person who I'm like, oh heck no, like horror is not for me. Like I can't do suspense in a movie of any kind. Like, what's the movie where they're looking for the Constitution or whatever that has Nicolas Cage, and I'm totally blanking out on the title, but
Something with the dollar bill, and there's something in the
yes, yeah,
dollar
I
bill that
can't
they
remember the
can't figure
title.
out.
Somebody's
I
gonna
don't
go,
know.
why can't you think of that? But I mean,
It's
there's
not
this
Face
scene
Off.
where
I
they're
know that.
going down this like spooky, the spooky staircase into the cellar, and like, what if they're gonna fall into the abyss? National Treasure. Thank you, Madeline. And like I have to get up and leave, like, excuse me, I'm going for a potty break because I can't do suspense of any kind. So I've always thought I don't would never be interested in reading horror or like anything. But then I discovered that one of my favorite authors that's working currently, she's written Gothic horror,
Hmm.
Southern Gothic horror. And to me, I'm like, well, if that's horror, I'll read that. I think for me, what's if there's like really intense suspense involved, or if there's like psychological stuff, then I'm like, nope, I'm out. But if, horror can be different kinds of things. And so I think some kinds of horror you might be able to do in poetry, maybe a longer poem of
Hmm.
some kind, like gothic horror, cosmic horror, where you're dealing with like the unknown entity that's creeping in. Like, I think there's some kinds of horror that you could do in poetry, but that
Yeah.
whole sort of um psychological jump scare kind of horror that you get in movies, I don't know if you can do that in a poem. I don't know if you can do a jump scare in a poem. So
I mean, maybe it's like shame on us for not mentioning Poe, but I think, I feel like there's
yeah.
elements of traditional horror in a lot of Poe's poems. Maybe I'm thinking of stories too, though. I don't know.
And I think that's a big point, Will, that prior to film, what was horror, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
and knowing that poetry existed so much longer than any of our other verbal arts.
yeah, yeah,
So I don't think maybe it is the moment right now, and, and how we have been accustomed to other media from poems, or maybe we just haven't encountered it or sat with it as long. But at some point, all the servers are going to collapse, and you're going to be sitting in the woods with the other survivors with just a little bit of fire, and someone's going to read a poem, and it's going to
yeah,
rhyme, and it's going to be terrifying to you because that's all that's left.
yeah,
And
yeah,
but yeah, what that encounter is like. I'm curious what
yeah, yeah,
how time changes our experience with horror and art.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And it comes back to what you said, like what we talked about, what makes something horror. And there's different kinds of horror. I mean, honestly, turning on the news right now is very much like deeply disturbing and scary. And so I don't know if a poem can ever quite get that. um I'm looking at what Madeline is saying about she wanted to know if anybody had read the book In the Dream House. um
And
Interesting.
what I love about
Very.
the conversation about this is all of these various genres, whatever we might call them, are these really nebulous categories
Yeah, yeah,
that we've created, that the publisher has created to give it to us, right? Now in 2023, there's going to be new art informed by new technology, just like that paper allowed us to create new ways of sharing art. Film created new ways, digital media does, and in all these facets, language is going to be infused in it, right? Language isn't going to
yeah,
go away,
yeah.
and some form of poetry is going to exist in all of these. So thinking through that, I mean, it might be fun. And so, I would love to do a little bit of writing with you all based on this
Okay.
idea. And I love that you said, Will, like you're like, I don't know if it's horror, but it's poetry can absolutely be disturbing, right? I think you
Hmm.
used the words disturbing and unsettling. I absolutely believe poetry, when you read it, you can experience that disquiet or unease. And so, if those are cousins to horror, um, let's let's see if we can meet the family. I don't know. Let's meet the cousins. So hey, if you all are willing to do some free writing with us, and Chrissy, I never know how this is experienced by people watching this later. So like we could do some
Yeah.
writing and have a good time. And if
Yeah.
I don't know
So,
if
and I think I would say to anybody watching later, totally we'd love to have you like participate. And we're gonna share afterwards. Feel, do I encourage you to share with somebody or do the writing exercise with somebody else so that you can have somebody to share with and talk about. And try to check comments. I don't do it as religiously as I should, but I do check them at least once a week. So if you want to put comments or post something that you wrote as a result of watching the video in the comments, that would be awesome. And yeah, so we'd love to still have you participate even if you're watching this later.
and we can always edit later to have during the quiet times while we're writing, we can have like the Monster Mash just play on loop, right? So, we can have Misfits just play just to give you that Halloween feel. All right. Yeah, let's do some free writing and see if we can build out that sense of disquiet or unease using the techniques of poetry. So I got a piece of paper that I'll write on. Use whatever makes sense to you, but this is going to be just sort of really easy, low stakes kind of writing and see what we can build out of it. So I really like just starting with words and lists. So what I'm going to ask us to do first is to make a list, and by list I mean aim for 3 to 5. See if you can get to 3 to 5, and when we're good with that, we'll move on to the next prompt. Make a list of spooky settings, places. Make a list of spooky settings. So go for it. Let's see what we can come up with. And everyone have at least 3. Come up with that last one. And if you can't think of a spooky one, just put whatever comes up in your head because it'll work. Any word you have will work. Okay. Christy, share us one that was on your list.
A basement in an old house.
Love it. Basement in the old house. Classic spooky. Will, you got one for us?
Sure. An Olympic-sized pool full of mud.
Full of what?
That's upsetting.
Full of knives? Is that what it was?
Mud.
Yes, that's fantastic. I love that. Not as classically spooky, but absolutely spooky. I would be disturbed. Madeline, feel free to unmute if you have one.
She says a bathroom at a funeral parlor.
Beautiful. Funeral parlor bathroom. Fantastic. I put graveyard. Come on, we're going for the easy ones here. Low-hanging fruits. Very good. You got some spooky settings. Give me some spooky animals. Give me a list of at least 3.
Animal?
Oh, we're calling out our pets. Spooky
animal?
animals, go for it.
Come here. Are you a spooky animal? You want to be a spooky animal? Hmm.
I could just be singing Monster Mash while y'all are doing this. You did the mash. You did the Monster Mash. All right. Get one more down. Get one more word down. Spooky animal. All right. Unmute. Tell me what's your spooky animal? What's at least one spooky animal you came up with?
I came up with an eye.
Eye with the big eyes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I was just in the Philippines. I saw some tarsiers. Similar idea, big-eyed
Yeah, yeah.
primates. They're our cousins. Let's show some respect, people.
Madeline says possum.
Possum, that hairless tail, the night vision, spooky creatures. I put a crow. Traditionally spooky creature.
This
You
is
got
this
one.
is semi-traditional. An Olympic pool-sized squid.
Trust me, if you are a sperm whale, that thing is scaring you, like a baby sperm whale. You're like, oh, that's my enemy. I don't know. No,
Which animal?
that's as classically black a black cat as you're gonna get.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Let's try one more of these and see what we can build off of this. But we could do these lists forever and it would be fun. Give me spooky adjectives. Spooky adjectives. And another song I would put on our, set list for Halloween, of course, is Typo Negatives, Black Number One, as perfectly Halloweeny as a song as you're gonna get. But
Is
I
that
won't
how
sing
do
that
you
one for you.
spell that? Is it typo
Black.
like
Oh,
typo?
typo, like the blood type. Type O negative. Very goth band from
Ah,
the 90s,
and what was the
early
name of the song?
2000s. Black Number One.
I'll have to look it
The
up.
the object of the affection dyes her hair black with Black Number One. So okay. What are our spooky adjectives besides spooky, or you use spooky?
Yeah. Empty.
An Olympic-sized pool of spookiness. I'm feeling all of those, Will. Who's got a spooky adjective for me, please?
Empty.
Empty. Yeah.
And Madeline
Burnt. I
says
see burnt.
burnt. Yeah.
Yeah.
My best one is
Feels very
turbid.
autumn. Turbid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like where it's unclear, like the water is turbid,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Cool. I put dark. Right? Dark feels like a spooky sort of word. Okay, before we get into some shaping of this, you have some words, and whatever writing we're trying to do. Sorry, this isn't coming through
That's
clearly
okay.
at all. We're probably starting with some words, and I love the idea of starting with just a few words and seeing um what pathway that takes you, because now you only have so many choices, and a world with too many choices can feel very overwhelming. A few choices, now prune your pathways and you know where you can go. Here's what we're going to do with the pathways these words built for us. I want you to think. So I have three for each of those categories. For example, I have the word graveyard, sanitarium, and mansion. I have the word rat, snake, crow. I have the word slimy, creaky, dark. I want you to now think of the opposite of each of those words. The opposite. I'm completely stealing this from the poet Brendan Constantine. If you have not seen his poem on YouTube, The Opposites Game, it is well worth your time. But now just try to think of the opposite of what any of those words mean. Let's see where we land. right, and let's hear it. You don't have to have a list of opposites for everything, but let's hear what are some of your pairings of opposites, knowing that you are the thesaurus of your own writing. You get to say what is the opposite of whatever it is. So, for example, my word was graveyard, and I could have had an opposite of a place where people are born. Instead, I put bakery. I don't know. The bakery felt like the exact opposite of a graveyard to me. And the opposite of a snake to me was a puppy. I don't know why. I just said a puppy is the opposite of a snake. What are some of your opposite words, please? Or pairings?
Well, I had cellar spider as being spooky and jumping spider as not being spooky.
Got it. So once that are said, there's something about elevation makes a difference of your spookiness.
I think the opposite of an Olympic-sized swimming pool full of mud is a thimble full of dew.
Of what?
A thimble full of dew?
Dew. DEW.
Yes.
Not doo-doo.
Yeah,
No.
I wasn't sure.
A thimble
No.
of dew. DEW.
That's a synonym, though.
Yeah, there we go.
Homonym? I can't remember how these work. Homonym,
Yeah.
homophones? Love it. Look at the
So,
ones we have
yeah,
from Madeline.
Madeline
Bloody
says-
and empty. I love
Yeah.
that. So these are two adjectives that might feel like opposites. Burnt versus frigid. Love this as far as the opportunity that this will provide in our actual shaping of this. What do you have, Chris? Chris, you shared the jumping.
I have one
What
for
else
the
you got?
basement. I made the opposite of that be a cozy sitting room.
Oh, the sitting room,
Yeah,
the solarium, the whatever that thing.
something happy.
Yeah, that thing you sit on, that seat that's in the French windows, right?
Yeah, something you
Oh,
actually want to go into instead of
right.
not wanting to go into.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. So the reason I wanted us to shape now, we have now even twice as many words as we can have. And going back to that idea of what Will was saying of like disturbing, unsettling, that we absolutely believe poetry can be within that realm. And we've read a lot that's within that realm, I think, if not straight up horror. I think there are techniques that create that disturbingness, that unsettledness, what I've been calling disquiet and unease, I think is similar. And I think there's a couple tools that we can concentrate on or techniques to see if, well, do we have the start of a poem that might be good for Halloween 2024? And the two tools I'm thinking of are surprise, which we know poetry is really good at, but surprise as far as both the unexpected and the unresolved. That poetry is absolutely built for that, of being built for not having neat bow ties at the end and happily ever after. The other thing I'm thinking of is this word parataxis. And I'm not an English major, so someone can absolutely correct me on YouTube on this. But as I understand parataxis, it's this idea in writing where you have a bunch of statements or clauses that are juxtaposed without any explanation of their relationship. The one I keep seeing online in prose is Julius Caesar's I came, I saw, I conquered, versus saying, first I came, and then I saw, and finally I conquered. And the fact that those bits are shared without any explanation of their relationship, I think in poetry is even more powerful, because I could see the order of operations for a despot trying to take over some sort of territory, to say, well, first I came and then I saw and then I conquered. But I think poetry can do even more that way. So let me just share a quick poem that I think has some level of that disturbingness. And let's see if we can quickly play around with the bits and pieces of what we have now and see if we could shape it. So this is from a book called Ruin by Cynthia Cruz. While not horror, I find a lot of her poems just really unsettling. I find them disturbing. And this poem is called Sparks, Nevada. And Sparks is a real city. I looked it up, and its nickname is City of Promise. So I don't know if she meant that intentionally, but it doesn't feel like a very promising poem. Sparks, Nevada. In the middle of the night, father brought me a falcon. By morning, it ripped the wire and flew the hill into the highway. When they found me in that car, my sleeve stemmed in blood. I didn't know what it was I was trying to kill. I saw a craft of orphans streaming down the river. They were dressed in white and silent as a seance. It was then I spoke to the bird. Already God is shaking his black seed back into me. So first, I have no idea what's happening in this poem. There's a speaker. She has a father, and the father brings her a falcon. The falcon runs away or flies away. Sorry, falcons don't have to run. They can fly. And in flying away, it seems like her sleeve is probably, her arm is cut up and is bloody because falcons have very sharp claws. That's what I get thus far. I don't know why she suddenly sees a craft of orphans. A craft I see as like some sort of raft, some sort of vessel of orphans. They're dressed in white and they're very quiet, and she just sees them. There's no explanation of that or what that has to do with the falcon. But later, then it was then I saw them, and suddenly I spoke to the bird. Is that the same falcon that flew away? I have no idea. But there is that juxtaposition of that surprise and that unexpected. And there's also the use of words that aren't the most horrible words. And so that's why I ask you to do the opposites. Because sometimes people are like, I got to write a scary poem. Let me use the scariest words I have all together. But that doesn't create surprise. That creates the exact same tone over and over. In that poem Will read, there was a phrase, terrible freedom, right? So we had an adjective, terrible, freedom, a noun, which is a good thing. And they were paired together in a way that was surprising, right? And so being able to use both images without explaining them and using pairings of words that we don't expect, I think creates that level of unease that we sometimes feel. So let's see. I don't know. Yeah, do we have 5 minutes to try writing something, or do you want me to just offer something? And then, okay.
No, that's perfect.
5 minutes, that's a lot of pressure. It gives me enough time to sing typo negative a cappella if I wanted to while you're writing.
I was going to ask the two of you to put, and I can do the same, to put into the comments maybe while we're writing really quick, the name of the books that you guys read from again, because I'm going to put those in the description so that people can look them up later. I'll write them down while we're writing so that we don't have to talk about them again. But
that's awesome. Okay. I love that. I will absolutely do that. And yeah, I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to see how far you go. It is not an expectation that all of these prompts are going to be written. But I want you to try writing a line or sentence where some sort of speaker does an action. Why an action? Because actions are useful. So, for example, you could say, it was then I spoke to the bird. A speaker does an action, right? So have a speaker do one thing actively. Also, write a line where there's a description of an animal without explanation. So you have 6 animals, 10 animals written there. Pick one of them, see what happens. Also, write the description of a setting without explanation. Don't explain how the setting has anything to do with the animal. Don't explain how the setting has anything to do with the speaker doing whatever action you have them doing. And finally, one more challenge here. Add a line where the tense changes. And I will absolutely, Madeline, write all this into the chat.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
If I were more with it, I would have shown you all like a PowerPoint with this. But these are 4 sentences you're trying to build out. 4 sentences may not mean 4 lines. Your sentences might become multiple lines. And what's cool about that is, wow, 4 sentences might be a full poem already, or the skeleton of a full poem, to be as spooky as possible here. So I'm going to repeat it again verbally, and then I'll put it into the chat, and we'll give ourselves 5 minutes to see what we create. So the first thing is write one sentence where a speaker, a character of some sort, is doing an action, something that you could visually see them doing, or hear them doing. So an action sentence. Write one sentence where an animal is described without explanation. And what I mean by no explanation, don't explain why this animal is part of the story of the person with the action. There's an animal there suddenly, I don't know. And then there was this squid. The squid was long. It was, dare I say, Olympic size, if I had to describe the squid. You're going to describe a setting. So I would, I could say something like, and it was then that Armin had finished the dishes, and the Olympic sized squid was squidding as it does outside the window. Dusk was falling nicely. So then you're going to do some sort of description of setting. And then here, this last one is challenging. Not challenging, but it's interesting. This is where I think you can have an interesting turn. You're going to change the tense at the end. So you're going to say something that's in maybe future tense, or if you've been doing past tense, you're going to do something present tense. Because in that piece that I just read you, it was all in past tense. This falcon came, the falcon went away. I saw orphans, and then it changes to present tense. Already, God is shaking his black seed back into me. Those are those moments of startle and change that are opportunities in poems that would not make any sense in prose, but can exist in the world of verse. So I'm going to put them into the chat. Give yourselves 5 minutes to see if you have some fun with this, and we'll see what we create out of it.
Come on. Yeah. Be right back. There you go.
One more minute, maybe, to piece together
Yay.
your your unsettling, if not horrifying poem. I guess, and one other thing that is worth pointing out as you play around with an exercise like this, right? We're doing opposites, but you could do this spectrum of saying that there are words that we feel are like, oh, these are very spooky or very Halloweenish, and these are the least Halloweenish. And within those, how you balance out the rhythm and the connotation of those words. If you pick some from this column or this end of the spectrum and this end of the spectrum, you'll have something that will keep people on their toes. And if you're always picking things, so if you say the scary crow, the frightening spider versus the delightful spider, there are opportunities where we throw the reader into moments of I don't know where we're going with this, and it allows that nuance that poetry creates. So, anyone care to share some of your lines or how your lines sit together? What are your experiences with it?
I'll share my poem. In the tradition of all prompts that I seem to respond to, I barely responded to your prompts, but I was writing as you were saying them, so they filtered in there.
Perfect.
They filtered in there somehow.
That's what I love.
All right, all right, all right. A red deer drips blood in the dew thimble, turbid pool, nuclear and translucent. Your black is orange and sweet. I have been to more coffins than kittens, or inside the cold eyes of mice where wind lays a pillow. I am sorry, little finch, but the bathwater is glass.
Love that. Cold eyes of, say that word again.
Mice.
Mice, cold
Mice.
eyes of mice. The finch being there, that dew thimble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, there's something about that,
I
right? Like
know.
it's unexpected.
Yeah.
And it just,
Yeah.
because if it was just all horrifying things, and here's the cobweb, and here's the thunder, you just
Yeah.
get used to it. This kept us on our toes.
I can share mine. I probably should have shared mine before Will, not after. But I found myself like latching on to like one of the locations and then trying to think of it in two different senses, like the opposite. Um A cricket sings a melody unseen, 1,000 feet stomp in time, moisture drips from abandoned concrete. I waited, but you never came.
So I love this. Like we don't know the relationship between the crickets, right? And then the speaker. And the speaker only comes at the end. And that's the thing, that there's these opportunities where sometimes people try to explain so much in the poem. Like, and there's this song from the 60s where it's like, no milk today, blah, 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 blah. And then the speaker goes to the effort of saying, The milk stands for love. If it wasn't clear enough to you, when I'm saying there's no milk today, I'm talking about your love is not here. You don't have to explain all that in the poem. Trust your reader to want
Yeah.
to enter it. Madeline, would you like to share anything? Your call. No, no pressure. Ooh, is it cool if I read this out loud, Madeline? Your call. It says, in the attic, she unlatched the circle window, emptied deer 2 paces from the gravel road. Frigid daylight poured into her eyes. White crystalline waiting rooms drift down. Ooh, frigid daylight. So, again, you could say frigid night, but people see that. There's something about the fact that it's daylight and it's frigid, which is very real. That happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Emptied deer is so unexpected. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Here's what
Yeah.
I sort of scribbled down, if it's okay for me to read here.
Yeah.
I have been sewing the quilt of Jerusalem thorns, but the bleeding makes my needle slip. A crow is bright with its celebration at the discovery of someone's pet smeared on Dulce Boulevard. It's raining, and everything that has been lost to the road will run through the drains into the sparkling Pacific. When I was a boy, I too was found by the crows at my most gashed, and here I am, returned from the oceans and clouds. So I don't know if that's going to be anything, but I would never have written that had I not tried
Yeah.
to play around with the possibilities of the opposites and those possible sentence structures.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that why I keep dragging you all back to do these. Is it just really fun to see what everybody comes up with? And that would never have happened if you're not sitting around going, well, what happens if we do this? So yeah.
Thank you all for writing and going for that. And yeah, I hope we get
Thank
to
you. That was
read these
fun.
in October 2024.
You keep saying 2024. Not yet. Let's just do 2023 first. So, and we have someone that's watching on YouTube. So they have the prompt. They haven't put anything in the chat. I said I welcome them to do that. So if somebody pops in and says something, but at least they can play around with that while they're watching. Would you all like to share by way of closing anything that you brought of yours that is sort of spooky? How about we have you go first, Armin, and then Will can finish us off.
Yeah, happy to. Here's a poem about autumn, but maybe what makes it spooky is it sort of speaks to how dry autumns have been lately, which is not a good thing. Even though the weather is beautiful, we're going to pay for it. Driest autumn in the driest decade of our reckoning. What left can I expect from our house of straw? The weave so loose, the weevils glut their clicking jaws on our brittle walls of wheat. All night, I'm mocked by this anthem of our loss. I barely sleep, no matter how much I tithe to the patron saint of parasites. Your hair is brittle as our house. I scavenged moss and squeezed its moisture on your face to keep your cheeks from caving. Nothing's worked. Each breath collapses you more. Woman turned husk, mother of chaff. If you still remember the well, now choked with thorns, I pulled up buckets and buckets of dusty silver you dropped per prayer. I still can't fathom how much it must cost for even one wish to crawl out and taproot in our salted fields. But still, you gave until your legs gave out. All you earned fed back into the earth's parched mouth. I sweep the weevil shells and pour them in the well. I stack the reclaimed silver bits like bricks to build a tarnished mausoleum. This dusk, which has come early, dry, and cold, I propped you up so you could see the horizon, and we waved and waved to the nothing coming like stalks with seated heads so heavy. One good wind will lay us down and scatter us into tomorrow.
That's very, I don't know. Cool is not quite the right word for that one. But the words are cool. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting topic for a poem on the night that we're talking about, like spooky or scary poetry, is that, it deals, I think poetry has a tendency to deal more often with what's really frightening, I guess. Whereas I think film often is our Halloween films, at least, are often more about jump scares and that kind of thing, and one last person winning in the end. So thank you. And Will, do you want to finish us off tonight?
I will. Armin, thank you for that. I think what I want to say that poetry deals in or dwells in that things like horror maybe can't, is sort of the indeterminacy of it and of its subjects. I think poetry has a way of peeling back facts to expose the reality underneath of them, you know? And for me, I think Armin's poem did that. And like, what does the poem mean? I don't know. And that's the thing, and maybe that's like the scariness of the poem, and it's subtle little ways. But yeah, thank you for that, Armin. And Christy, thank you for making this space for me to be astounded by everybody. It's great. I really appreciate it. Okay, poems. I don't know if this poem is spooky or what makes it spooky, but it is spooky, so proceed it.
If you say it's spooky, then it is.
Yeah, right. It's spooky
You got to
season,
decide. So
right. Okay. Sweater weather. Are we an umbrella? Are we white finches? I find small bones inside a deadbolt, and this makes my doctor cry. Portion of roof rack carrying roofs. The world is oblong and testable. This is repetition. The small tastes of church, unpalatable, but for money, that fucked wet bench, that floral anemone. The winter here is such a sun bumper. Nobody let the whale in the house, but the floor is still salt. Until a man can eat what he walks on, the ceiling is B's and Q's. All hope in the world is stuck in the alphabet. Razor wire on the fences makes beautiful fences. Thank you again. This has been really great.
yeah, no, that's yeah. I think the problem with poems is you're like, wait, back up, read that one line again. Let's sit with that for a minute. Is that part of is what you guys read tonight a part of any publication that someone could go back to? Okay.
Unless you want to pick it up, someone, and I can
Yeah.
edit it for public consumption.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun, and we'll definitely do it again. But I really appreciate it. And
And
I
Madeline had just put in a comment. Is it possible
oh
for her to
yes.
share us a spooky
Oh,
poem?
absolutely. Please
Cool.
do.
Thanks, Madeline.
So I
I'm
can
gonna read
read.
it. Okay, do you
You
want
want-
to read it?
yeah. The owl stood outside my closed bedroom door, and I saw the staring yellow through the chipped eggshell paint, unblinking, observing keenly my sharp spine and locked fists. That's super cool. Thank you, Madeline. Thank
See
you
how the
for
verbs
coming.
work, right? That's the whole thing. How the verbs,
Yeah,
or sorry, the adjectives work with the nouns, right? And if it's
yeah,
predictable, then there's no point in the adjective being there.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's interesting. Like this is some random thing. We'll probably have to talk about the full bulk of it next time. But I think what interests me is I will go back and read, all the bad poetry that I wrote in high school. And it usually is just describing things, which I think we all have to start there, but it's pretty straightforward. You're just sort of waxing eloquent about how great everything is or how terrible everything is because it's high school, right? But I think what's interesting is when you start playing with adjectives and verbs or adjectives and nouns or opposites like we did tonight, like things that don't seem like they should go together, but somehow they do, that you kind of cross that road from high school poetry to the rest of your life poetry. So that's very cool, Madeline. Thank you for sharing. So oh, thank you, Armin. I will share that. I'm having so much fun listening to the poems that I have completely blanked out of all the things coming up that I'm supposed to share with you. But so this was tonight. Next week I'm trying to think of who I've got next week. I think it's Maya Prasad and Susan Azim Boyer. Pretty sure you can check the website to fact check me, but I'm pretty sure that's who's coming up next week. They're both YA writers. I got the privilege of talking with them a few months ago about books that they had come out last year, but they both had new books come out this year, so we get to talk to them again, which is going to be really fun. Our holiday catalog goes live this Friday. So we've been working in the store to get all those titles on a display and all that kind of fun stuff, which means around the bookstore, at least, it's officially Christmas shopping season, which is I'm freaking out about a little bit. But hopefully you'll stop by and see all the fun stuff we have for that sometime during your shopping season. And finally, we have book clubs this month. The both the date and the times have changed for both of them. So double check the website if you would like to participate. The one big change for that this month is that the Sci-Fi Fantasy Book Club is going to meet virtually this month, because we're going to talk about Soul Jar, which is a collection of sci-fi fantasy stories that center the disabled experience. It's published by our friends at Forest Avenue Press in Portland. And the person who edited it is a fellow bookstore up north in the Puget Sound area named Annie Carl. So I'm super excited to talk about the book. And then next, after the Christmas season is over, next January, sometime, we're going to actually get to talk to a bunch of the writers that participated in that too. So join us for that. I will have Zoom links. We'll do that kind of like we did tonight, where you are welcome to participate on Zoom. Since it's a book club, that obviously would make the most sense, but I will probably stream that to YouTube as well if people just want to watch. So thank you again, Will and Armin and Madeline, for joining us. And I hope you all have a good rest of your Thanksgiving. Oh gosh, no. Halloween. Eat some candy.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Vintage Books. Support your independent bookstores. Y'all are wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.